Good afternoon, everyone. We continue our study on this important chapter 12 of the book of Exodus. We left off in verse 11 as it was an instruction that was given to Moses and Aaron to be told to the people of Israel what they have to do at this particular day that is designated to be the Lord's Passover. And we spent some time to discuss the word Passover as an idea of hopping over. We continue from verse 12. Verse 12 says this. He says, For I, and this means that it is a personal description of God saying it, for I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night. And that would be on the night of the 15th of Nisan. Now, that is something that we need to pay attention. This would be 15th of Nisan or 15th of the month. The idea of pass through literally means to uh, cross over. Now, this idea is that if there is a land and you walk from one to the other, this is to pass through. This is the whole idea that God says, I will pass through the land on the night. When it says the night of the 15th, it means after sunset. And think of it this way, this is the 15th. And this is the 14th. And this would be sunset. As it crosses the sunset, this would be nighttime of the next day. So we need to understand and appreciate that the day begins in the evening. And God says on that night, and the night is a 12-hour night, God says, I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt, I will execute judgment. I, the Lord. And let me just briefly explain this. This is what God is telling Moses and Aaron that I will pass through the entire land of Egypt on that very night of the 15th after they have eaten the Passover with a belt on your waist, sandals on your feet, staff in your hand, all ready to go. Eat in haste. It's going to be a hurried meal. God says that that very night, he will strike. The idea of strike in this case is nakak. That will be to kill, to slay. Every time you see the word God will kill someone in this manner, strike, as in kill or slay, it has to do with judgment. God never takes a person's life unless it is part of a judgment, a decision to punish. And so it will be wrong to say that God took a life unless God actually did that as a means of punishment. And so God says, I will punish by killing, taking the life of all the firstborn in the land of Egypt as he passes through the land of Egypt, both man and beast. Now, it's important for us to realize this is the humankind as opposed to the animal kind. And so for the firstborn of the beast, they're all the male species or the male gender. And then God adds another clause here. God is doing this against all the Elohim. This is Elohim of Egypt. Now, one of the things that we need to understand is when God did this strike in the night of the 15th, it is to both man, beast, and the Elohim of Egypt. And one of the interesting things that we would see as we go along, as we bear this in mind, that at the very night when God struck the land of Egypt, the man and beast died, and everybody knew. But when God struck the gods of Egypt, they wouldn't know unless they go to the temple. And they would normally go to the temple in the daytime. And so when God struck, they thought that it was only man and beast. But here we are told God is going to judge the entire land of both man, beast, and Elohim, particularly of the firstborn, not to kill everyone, but the firstborn. Now, in Egypt, being an Eastern Oriental place, firstborn is a very important child of the family. It is the firstborn son. And the firstborn son is deemed to be the most important to carry the lineage. That's generally the case. Now, not all firstborn carry lineage, obviously, but in general, the firstborn is seen as the most important in the line of sons. In verse 13, then we are told, now 13 will be, now the blood shall be a sign for you on the houses where you are. Now remember, always, when you see the word sign, it is visible. There is no such thing called an invisible imaginary. Whenever it's a sign, it is visible. And so the blood can be seen on the houses where you are. And God says, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Now, this also needs a bit of explanation. Understand, first of all, the blood is visible on the outside of the house, which means that killing the sheep or the goat or the ram or the male goat and then put the blood out there is really a very bold move. And there is a symbol because after killing the animal, the blood is to be shown that the animal is dead. There is no way that the animal is just wounded, the animal is dead. So the amount of blood that's out there is to symbolize that they have obeyed God in the instruction. And God says, when I see, remember, it is visible. These are all language that tells us that God can see. So when God passes through the land of Egypt, God says in verse 13, he will pasak over you. Now, this is a very important element. We learned last week that pasak is to hop on one leg. It is as though one is lame, and so the only movement is to hop on one leg. If a person is completely lame, the the description would be that it would be applied to both legs. Now, there is such a term that's used in the Bible when it's used when both legs are lame. Otherwise, by default, it's one leg. And it says, Pasak over you, and the act of Pasak, the hopping over, is called Pesach, which is the name of the feast or the offering to God. Now, there is a clarity that we see when God sees the blood that he will hop over you. That's what it means. It's not that he is going to be lame and immobile over you. It is very important that we understand this because there is a, I would say, uh, 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 an idea that some people had proposed that this is a symbol and imagery where God is lame, that he is immobile, that he's standing at the door, and the plague shall not be on you to destroy. That's not the case. In the language that we have here, God says, I will see the blood and I will literally hop over you, and the destruction shall not be on you to destroy you when I kill the land of Egypt. So it is important that this represents the Pesach of Jehovah because he will Pasak over you. That is the play of words here. It is evident in the Hebrew, but it is not very clear in the English. In verse 14 now, it says, and then this day, which is the 15th, shall be to you a memorial. Now understand, after this event, it will be a remembrance. This is what it means. It's not that this day as it happens, but this day after it happens, and you shall keep it as a feast to Jehovah throughout your generations. The idea of keeping as a feast, this word here is that it shall be a feast, really. I think it's better to be stated that way, that it shall be a feast instead. You shall celebrate as a feast. Now, the idea of feast in this case is a matter of jumping. And so that's the idea of celebration. Feast, as in the Hebrew terminology, in this case, that it would be a hug, it would be a jumping, as in celebration. To God, you celebrate to God because you rejoice for what is going to happen. And this memorial or a remembrance shall be done throughout your generations. The idea of throughout your generations means this generation and the next and the next and the next. That is what it means. No, it does not say when it's going to stop. Then the text continues to allude, you shall keep it as a hug, as a jumping feast by an everlasting ordinance. Here is when you need to remember everlasting is olam. And we have seen this word over and over again. Olam means for a long time. And ordinance means a regulation, as in a particular law, that it is something that they have to do as part and parcel of a law. So it is not a suggestion, it is intimated as an ordinance that they must do to have this as a feast to jump up and down as an everlasting ordinance. And so when you can see this, this would be an A and a B. For throughout your generations is seen as a long, long time. a long, long time. Verse 15. Verse 15 now tells us this: 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Bear in mind the word for unleavened bread is one word. It is one word, unleavened bread. Unleavened bread is matzah. It is generally baked in a flat piece, is baked over fire, and uh, it has holes. It is maybe in a square panels, but basically it does not rise. It's unleavened bread, something like Jacob's crackers. And so 7 days you shall eat. Now, this is not the most pleasant of bread to eat. Obviously, it's dry. It does not have particular taste. And so God says, you shall eat this for 7 days. On the 15th is counted as the first of the 7 days. On the first day, you shall remove leaven from your houses. The idea of remove leaven from your houses, this word is sa'or. Now, the idea of sa'or is something that will make something to become fermented. This is the leaven, which is the ingredient that causes fermentation. Now, there is another word here. It says, for whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. And this is not leavened bread. Let me just explain this. He who eats, and this is one word as well, this is chametz. Chametz is fermented things. Anything that's already fermented. A matzah, on the other hand, is a bread that is baked without leaven, without or. And any material that ferments, and ferments is the the event where something turns sour. I think that would be a better way of understanding this. This does not mean leavened bread. It means something that is fermented. You cannot eat something that's fermented on the first till the seventh day. And so on the first day, and when it says the first day, the Jews would do it the day before to make sure that it's cleaned on the day before, so that by the first day, you will already be able to avoid having anything that is chametz. Because if you notice, this is a very serious offense. That person shall be cut off, karat, from Israel. This idea for to be karat from Israel literally says he will have no part, his portion of Israel will end, which tells us this. This is like a capital punishment. It is very serious, which means that there are other instructions that is not as serious, but this is very serious because the person's nefesh shall be cut off. You can see how God shapes the instructions. There are some instructions that you have no option. It's made into a law. There are some instructions that has a threat of some very serious consequences. And it would be the idea of eating chametz. For these 7 days, no one shall eat anything that has chametz. If that person does it, the penalty is very serious. He will be cut off from Israel. He would not have a part of Israel. On the first day, there shall be a holy convocation. Now, this idea of a holy convocation literally means that there is a time where they will gather. It is like an obligatory gathering, a special time to meet. And on the seventh day, there shall be a holy convocation as well. So something happens on the first day and on the seventh day. So if you notice, it is not just merely getting an animal on the 10th day and then killing the animal and then spilling the blood on the doorpost. That is a whole ritual that needs to be met. And there's a whole set of rules. And so I want to allude this to you. This is the Lord's Passover. This is Jehovah's Passover. And so it needs to be done by his rules. This is basically what it means. It's God's particular event. It must be done according to God's particular rules. And if you don't play by the rules, then you have no part of this event. Now, as it goes on, there are more rules. The rules is this: no manner of work shall be done on them. This is important. In verse 16, no manner of work. Now, this idea of no manner of work literally gives us a picture of a regular type of occupation. Regular occupation. Now, what does that mean? The idea of work is if you are a shepherd, so you do work uh, as a shepherd to take care of animals. So no manner of work will be, you don't do that work as a shepherd. If you are an iron smith, you stop doing that. So that is what it means, no manner of work. It doesn't mean anything that you do, like bringing the pots and pans or washing pots and pans. That is not the idea. So this idea of work is really an occupational work. And God says, in these 7 days, there is no occupational work that anyone must do, but that which everyone must eat. Now, what does that mean? It means this: if you are preparing to eat, then you can do that piece of work. So if you need to cook, then you need to cook. But this is how you shall observe the unleavened bread. For on this same day I have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. This same day is the 15th. Your armies in verse 17 is a very important word. This is about Sava. And why is this important? You've heard of the name Jehovah Sabaoth, that God is the Lord of all those who serve him. And so God says this is the army. The army of God would be the angels. But here, the Israelites are also called God's army, those who will serve God in this case, because there is a need for the army to march out of the land of Egypt. And this is throughout the remembrance. This is the same day when you start observing the unleavened bread. And as it is called unleavened bread, you do no occupation because it is the first day. The 15th is the first day. It is a special day, and you must eat matzah. There must be no chametz and no regular occupation. So you can see all of this are rules. So therefore, you shall observe this day throughout your generations, throughout your generations, as an everlasting ordinance, as an everlasting ordinance. Notice this whole idea is an A and a B. Throughout your generations means it is an everlasting ordinance. How do you keep it throughout your generations? Make it into a law that needs to be observed for a long, long time. In verse 18, in the first, on the 14th day of the month at evening, first month, 14th day. So, as I want to remind all of us, at this point in time, there is no names given. Like God never gave names to the name of the day of the week, nor the month of the year. Everything is done by a number, and it's by calculation. So we talk about the first of the month on the 14th day of the month. And so on the fourth day, when God made the sun, moon, and stars and appointed them and gave them the role to play, the Israelites, as well as ancient men, are able to tell time. When is it the beginning of the month? When is it the 14th day of the same month? When is it at the evening? Remember this word evening on the verse 18. This is really in the Aref. This would be in the day starting to be dark, and that would be towards the sunset. And then as the sun sets, the next day starts. That would be the 15th of the month. And so it says, on the 14th day at evening, when it is dark, it will turn dark, and then it goes into the 15th day, which is the beginning of the next day. You shall eat unleavened bread, and that would be matzah, until the 21st day of the same month at the evening, which is the darkening of the day. For 7 days, no leaven. And this word in 19, no leaven is or nothing that will cause anything to ferment shall be found in your houses. For that 7 days means before the 7 days starts, you have to clear everything. All leaven should be removed. Now, this word shall not be found in the 19th means you cannot see it, you cannot find it. Since whoever eats what is chametz, this would be what is chametz here, that same person shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel. Whether he is a ger is known as someone who is converted, or a native of the land. A native is etzra. Etzra. A native basically means a native Israelite. So both a convert, a ger, and one who is part of the 12 tribes, you cannot eat else you'll be cut off. Remember, it is a very serious offense. This applies to everyone who has taken Jehovah as God and is willing to stand by the rules that God has given. You shall eat nothing leavened. You shall eat nothing that has chametz. In all your dwellings you shall eat unleavened bread, which is matzah. So it means all your dwellings, all the places that belongs to you. So what happens now is what they will have to decide. If today they're no longer living Egypt, see, when they leave Egypt, they can destroy all the leaven and doesn't matter. And so, what this really means is that they now need to give their matzah to non Jews. And so, by their halakha, meaning the rule of how to abide by such a rule, is that they must not own any chametz. So, they sell their chametz to other people, to the non Jews. And after this feast is over, they will buy them back. That's one way. They will give it away and then they will be given back. As long as the chametz is not in their control and they don't own the chametz, they will be able to obligate themselves by this rule. And so the reason why they are so particular and have all these rules of what to do and why they need to do it is because this is a very serious offense if you break it. So this is God's rules. Can we say now that as a Jew, the Jew says, well, we are now in the 21st century, we can set this aside? And the answer is no, because it is an everlasting ordinance. It is throughout your generations. And so the Jews, at least the religious ones, will take it into such an importance because it is very serious. If God treats it as very serious, then so should the Jew. That is all it needs. Do they need to understand the why? No. And what necessarily that they need to do, just obey the rules. This is the way that the Jews would obey this because it is a memorial. They have to remember it throughout their generations. Now, up to this point in time of verse 20, God is speaking. I shall do this. I want you to do that. And Moses and Aaron represents the Israelites. Now, in turn, in verse 21, Moses is to repeat this to the rest of Israel. In verse 21, the word then is an and then. Basically saying that after God finished talking to Moses or instructing Moses, then it is Moses and Aaron's turn to speak to the rest. And so Moses, he called for the elders of Israel and said to them, now, I want to just highlight this, the word elders of Israel. Now, we've talked about this before. The elders of Israel are basically the older people or the elders, elder ones, elderly ones. And in every tribe, right, every tribe, there are a number of older ones. And the older ones are selected to represent the tribe. So they are both old and they are also both known as elders, being the ones that will represent the mouthpiece of the tribe. Moses is not there to talk to the millions of them. So the elders will go back and then instruct the tribes and the families. Now, the instruction works this way. Notice some of the words are slightly different. It says, pick and take lambs for yourselves according to the families. These words, pick, is to draw. By drawing, it gives us the connotation of taking and keeping, as if it was an instruction without having to say on the 10th of this month, find one. And then the next word here is take. Take essentially is to take and kill for yourself. So it is an instruction of the 10th and then to the 14th, spoken in a slightly different way, but it's in the Hebrew. And this is take and kill the Passover. The Passover would literally means a hop over offering. Every time you think of the Passover, it is something to kill. So you take the lamb. Now understand this lamb that we're talking about is back in the earlier part of this chapter. It is a ram or a male or a kid, right? A male goat, no more than 1 year old, complete, unblemished. Because for an offering to God, it needs to be perfect. It needs to be according to the rules of God. So, one of the things you notice, God's Passover, God's rules. It is not up to them to decide, I think I will give this animal. So Moses called out to them without saying all those words, it would have been said. Because there is such a thing called a written Torah and an oral Torah. So I would just want to highlight this to you. In the written Torah is what we read here. The oral Torah is what is spoken by tradition. So we can call this an oral tradition. Now, why is this important? It's because given what is written down, it is the outline. These are the details of exactly how to execute. That is why I want you to be very well aware. All these instructions, as it is written down, are the outlines. How they actually eventually do it, we can't see from the text. They are called oral because they are the details. So let me give you an example. How do you kill the lamb? How do you prepare the Passover offering? We don't know because we are not told. What is the recipe? How do you kill? How do you prepare? How do you skin? How do you know? All these burn. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop. How many strands of hyssop? How big a bunch? Now, a hyssop are little weeds that grow in that part of the world, and it has little leaves, and it is useful when you dip it into something liquid. It tends to hold it onto their little leaves, and so it's used to sweep, it is used to dip, and so now we see it, it's dipped in the blood that is in the basin. So how much of the blood of the lamb is kept in the basin? Uh, and what happens if you spill it? So there are lots of details that we're not told. We're just told the general outline. So dip it in the blood from the basin. And where did the blood come from? Well, we can see it from the Passover lamb. So then you say here, you are to strike the lintel. Now, this word strike the lintel is literally to smack at it. It is not just to apply, but is to apply by striking, smack, right? Smack the lintel, which is the top of the door, and the two doorposts with the blood that is in the basin. So you take the what we call the hyssop. Now the hyssop are strands of little leaves. Now how many strands we don't know, but we know that that's what it's used for. And you smack it on the doorpost and the lintel. This is the lintel. This is the two doorposts. And then as you smack at it, the blood that is stuck to the leaves will then get transferred to the doorpost and the lintel of the door. Then it says this, And after you've done that, of course, you have to be outside to do it. So we're not told. Now, how long outside? We are also not told. But none of you shall go out of the door of his house until morning, which means that after you have killed the lamb, take the blood, smack it onto the doorpost and the lintel with hyssop, and then go back into the door and wait there in the house. In verse 23, it says, For God, for Jehovah, and this is important, for Jehovah will pass through to strike the Egyptians. This is what it says. And this is the same word to it is to Nagav, right? To Nagav, giving the same ideas to strike at the Egyptians, to hurt them, to destroy them, right? To kill them. And when God sees the blood on the lintel and on the two doorposts, Jehovah will pass over the door. Again, I want to draw your attention. This word pass over literally means to pasak. It is not to lie there, it is to hop over the opening of the place that you're dwelling. And when he does that, he will not allow the destroyer to come into your houses to strike you. And here, I want to draw your attention to a very special word, the destroyer. Now, the word destroyer is mash hamit. Now, this is an important word. Mash hamit. It is a particular meaning. This is known to be a destruction angel, right? A destruction angel. Now, I want to just pause here so that you understand this. When God destroys, God doesn't do it himself. Like in the case of Second Kings, when the Assyrians came, Sennacherib came and surrounded Jerusalem, where Hezekiah was there with 185,000 strong army. God sent an angel, a malach, a messenger, an angel to destroy them. And so there is a destroyer, and this destroyer is known as Mashkhamit, the name of the destroyer, and he will come upon. Now, this word is to come upon your houses. It does give an idea of into the houses to strike you. Now, why does he say this? Because the work of the destroyer is to come into houses to strike, to hurt, to nagof, to kill, to slay. And so God says, if I see the blood, then I will not permit him to come in. His job is to just go through and wipe every firstborn, man and beast, from the face of the earth. But God does the first thing. God does the inspection. And so this inspection tells us that it is Jehovah that will see and inspect, and then God will hop over, pass over, and will not allow. So there's a lot of things that God is personally doing, but God is not personally doing the destroying. God is personally examining if the Israelites actually kept the rules of the Passover. His Passover, his rules. And if you don't do that, then they will no longer be your firstborn. You will be cut off. That is what it means. So, this is a very important idea. And please do not ever be mistaken. God is not going to sit there and lie there or be lame there. That is never the word applied to God. God is going to pasak. God is not going to be lame on two legs and lie there to guard the door. That is obviously not in the text, and I would be not willing to misrepresent the text. Verse 24 then tells us this: and you shall observe, you shall keep this word, this rule, this matter as a regulation for you and your sons. Now, what does it mean, you and your sons? You and your next generation and your next generation forever. Now, remember when I say forever, I refer to this word olam. It is for a long time. And so I don't like the word forever, but it's there in the translation. It will come to pass when you come to the land which God will give you, which is the promised land, just as he promised, that you shall keep this service. This is how you shall keep this when you come into the land. Remember, the land that God promised is both on the eastern shore and the western shore of the Jordan. And so when they come to the cross the Jordan, they started this Passover. And it shall be when your children say to you, when your sons ask you, Daddy, Daddy, what do you mean by this service? Remember, the word this service means this work. The thing that this is called the ha avodah, right? It's called ha avodah, and it literally means this that you hear from the master to do. The instructions that the master gives the servant. That is what it means. And the master here being Jehovah, and instructing your fathers who is the servant, and now your father is obeying it, so that the children, when they see the father, and this one is the sons, and I want us to understand this, not all the children, but the sons, because the sons will carry on to the next generation and your next generation, these sons. Because they see the father doing it, then when they grow up, they will do the same as what their fathers did that they saw. And their children or their sons will see this and they pass it down from generation to generation. And then you shall say, it is the Pesach of God. It is the Pesach of God. It's the Sevak Pasak, the Passover offering of God, who passed over the houses, who Pasak. So let's remember the play of words here. This is the Pesach of Jehovah, who Pasak the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt when he struck the Egyptians and delivered our household. The idea of deliver the household means to rescue, right? To rescue from Egypt, to rescue our household. And when these people, the elders bow their heads and worship, again, I want to draw your attention. There is no such word worship. All right. This word here is very clear. And the people knelt down. This is kadat. Kadat is to bend down. And then this next word here is uh, chava. And in the word chava, it is to prostrate. This is an A and a B. So what it means is they actually lie down and demonstrated, right? Demonstrated. And this is Moses. They did not worship Moses. They bent down, bowed down because of what Moses said to them, and they knew these are God's regulations. They bowed down because of what Moses said, because Moses spoke as representing God. And this is to demonstrate that they will humble themselves and they will do exactly that as an avodah. And so in verse 28, in closing of this passage, and then, and then the sons of Israel went away and did. Now this word, and then the sons of Israel went away and executed. What did they execute? They execute just as Jehovah had commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. So they executed. Now, what does that mean? They recognize what Moses communicated. The sons of Israel are now entrusted with the avodah, the service. They have to go back, which are the elders, to tell them what to do in each household, to deal with the lamb, to pick the lamb on the 10th, and then on the 14th, slaughter it, how to eat, how to prepare. So all of these details are not actually said here. What we are left is the outline. And so we are given the instruction of the outline, but to them who heard it all, obviously Moses would have said a whole lot more. But only these were written down and passed down to us today because only this is important to us. Now, when we read this being non-Jews, we then need to appreciate that God has given a whole lot more instruction that they will have to execute, and they pass it down by oral tradition. And by this, they essentially are very particular. They will not miss a detail because it is a very serious feast, a very serious ritual that they have to pass down from generation to generation to obey what to do with leaven, to get rid of it, and what to eat the matzah with bitter herbs. And that was told to Moses, but it wasn't said here, which means that a lot of things are not recorded for us to know. But suffice for us to know what was dictated by God to Moses and how a lot more of these instructions in detail is given to the children of Israel or the sons of Israel to go away and do exactly as they are told because they have the details. Now, with this, we come to the end of our session today, and we will complete the next passage uh, after we come back from the new year.